Shares of car makers under pressure after the White House announcing 25% tariffs on autos made outside of the United States. Joining us now to discuss what it means for the sector is Itai Michaley, Managing Director with TD Cowen. And for full disclosure on the companies covered by TD Cowen, a division of TD Securities, please see the link to the website at the end of this video. Thanks so much for joining us on this news. Your first time on the program. Looking forward to the discussion. Let's talk about how significant these tariffs are to the outlook for these auto companies.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, Greg. Yeah, these are significant tariffs, 25% on all light vehicles coming into the U.S. The Detroit 3, we think that could have a significant impact. And we're still waiting on some more details around what will happen to some of the parts. And so some of the details are still to come in terms of the final numbers. But suffice to say, these are significant tariffs, across the industry.
We know that the Detroit automakers have been sort of pushing back against this happening. It has now happened. We're seeing them all down today on the news. When we talk about a pricing perspective and consumer demand, I mean, a tariff of this size, what is it going to mean on that front?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we'll have to see how the companies respond. Do they raise prices at the risk of demand coming down? Do they decide to absorb the impact themselves? It could, frankly, become case by case, depending on vehicle line, depending on how profitable vehicles are. Does it make sense to produce some vehicles if the tariff would already kind of wipe out the vehicle's entire profitability? And so we'll kind of have to see how that goes. Historically, the industry typically does not pass along prices when costs go up. If you look at just that historical raw material costs and labor costs. So in some of the work that we published, we assumed the automakers kind of just would absorb a lot of it, at least initially, and then over time take steps to mitigate the tariff impact, particularly for the automakers. The big one really being the tariff on final assembled vehicles coming in to the United States, because those could be addressed potentially with moving production around. So there could be a sort of a short-term impact to think about and a longer-term impact that's more mitigated to think about as well. Certainly, I think in the month of April and May, we'll watch to see whether some car companies decide to try to raise prices, whether maybe some cut production, or and what degree do some just absorb the tariff themselves.
When you mentioned the potential for moving production around, I mean, this seems to be the aim out of the White House, that you're going to get more onshoring of manufacturing, including autos in the United States, in Canada, and Ontario in particular. We have some substantial operations for the big Detroit 3. Is it realistic for those companies to suddenly start building everything in the United States?
Sure. It can't happen overnight, but the Detroit 3 do have some plants, a number of plants in the U.S. with excess capacity. Now, not every one of those plants produces the same exact vehicle that's being produced in Mexico and Canada. Presumably, might have to be moved to avoid the tariff. A few plants have that advantage, but others just have excess capacity in other vehicle lines. So that could make it somewhat easier versus having to build a plant completely from scratch to ultimately move production. But it's not something that's easy to do overnight. There's supply chain considerations, there's validation considerations. But it is something that we wrote that if these tariffs do actually indeed become permanent, that is something the car companies might have to consider doing over time to mitigate that significant impact from the 25% coming in. There's still some detail, though, to work out in terms of some potential exclusions on the tariff for U.S. content. So I think we'll still have to kind of see how the automakers perhaps apply and maybe qualify for those exclusions. But moving production could end up becoming an option. There is some excess capacity, but it wouldn't happen kind of overnight. It would take some time. Is it months, years? What one could debate that, but it wouldn't happen right away.
Fully completed vehicles roll off the lines here in Canada, but auto parts, another big part of the story for us, because of course they can move back and forth across the border many, many times before going into a final car. And we know this is true of the auto industry, right? Parts are coming from all over the place. Could this fundamentally shift auto manufacturing?
It's a great question. Some of that will depend what kind of tariffs we see, particularly on USMCA compliant components that right now still have that initial relief. It is, to your point, a very complex kind of supply chain, a very kind of efficient supply chain that's been developed over some time. It could take longer to sort of shift that around if that needs to be the case. But I think a lot of that will ultimately depend on the final impacts and other mitigation efforts that the auto industry could take. Certainly from a final assembly perspective, as we talked about, it may be easier to sort of shift final assembly capacity as opposed to an entire supply chain around automotive, but some of that will ultimately depend on what the actual net tariff impacts is on the component side and how the industry chooses to handle and try to mitigate some of that.
Itai, before I let you go, when we think about everything that's happening right now, you said we have some details here, we need some clarity. What's the next thing you're watching for on the auto file here that'll give us a little more clarity?
Absolutely. We're going to watch for, of course, what the automakers' official responses are as they come out. Do they share what their contingency and mitigation plans are? Is there more scope for negotiation, particularly ahead of next week? Those are some of the things we're going to be watching for, as well as just clarity on some of the terms that were announced yesterday. And as time kind of moves on to understand exactly what the financial impacts would be. So it's one, just more clarity on just some of the outstanding matters around the tariff itself, to the official automaker responses and what the game plan may be for them. And then, of course, beyond the potential for maybe more negotiation between now and next week, to your point earlier, what happens to auto demand and pricing and production throughout April and May will be important to track as well as an indication of how the industry is responding to this development.